So this book this book was really challenging for me in ways that
Mhm.
I didn't expect. Like
Sure.
I know that Mike is a polarizing figure.
Hmm.
He's a polarizing figure, and you either love him or hate him, kind of thing.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah. I can
So
see that.
there's really not a lot of in between.
Hmm.
Um, and so like for me, I I kind of hate him. I mean, it's
Fair
just, like
point.
just to be
Yeah,
honest
fair
with you.
point.
I mean, I respect his viewpoint. I do, and
Hmm.
I definitely respect his passion
Hmm.
a lot. But there's times when I found myself cheering, and there's times when I found myself cringing in the
Oh,
book.
yeah. Oh,
I
definitely.
so there was both. I had both camps.
Uh-huh.
It was like being drawn and quartered.
Hmm.
But yeah, not quite that excruciating, but
Sure.
it's one of those things where I was being pulled in both directions. So
Oh, I
like
bet. Yeah.
I got some good stuff from this. Like, and I
Hmm.
even in the last episode, I even mentioned him in a
Hmm.
quote from the book about
Yeah.
how we're building the plane while flying it.
Hmm.
I think that like kind of sums up a lot
Hmm.
of the rant that
Oh, yeah.
he put into the book.
Hmm.
So
Oh, yeah.
I feel like that was a profound statement, and it just kind of it sheds a lot of light on where we are as designers today in this field. It's not just about playing with the next prototyping tool.
Oh, sure.
It's become a lot more than that, than about
Oh,
just
heck yeah.
making cool stuff.
Yep. Not just pixel pushers anymore. Gatekeepers,
Yeah,
consultants,
yeah,
humans too. That was a big thing too. You were saying, the first job is just to be human. And so if, we're acting unethically, we're feeling as our job as humans, let alone designers.
yeah,
Yep.
exactly. That's interesting. The gatekeeping part was I like the way he puts that because
Hmm.
I've always just I've always thought of myself as I'm a designer, and as a designer I never minimized the power and impact that our roles as designers can have. I never minimized the
Hmm.
impact, but I think I also never, until like some of these cases came up, and really what he's done is he has encapsulated a lot of really kind of important issues and cases.
Oh yeah.
I really think there's some political stuff, like when he starts getting political and
Hmm.
and stuff like that, and talking about the white boys, and
Hmm.
that really turns me off. I feel like,
Sure.
why do you have to bring race into this? I know that he has his reasons for that, but I know he's not trying to, but he's comes off a little unintentionally racist to me,
Hmm.
and it's a little offensive as a white male that I have
Gotcha.
no control over being a white male in the field of design. I can't control that, but I just feel like when some of the statements that he made are I don't see how they could be at all helpful to anyone when it
Gotcha.
comes to like talking about the white boys in Silicon Valley. Like it's like you're shaming, what you're doing is you're shaming the entire race of white males in that
Hmm.
work in tech and design, and I think that's wrong.
I was thinking about that at different points where I think there's a lot of different places where different people, especially if they were kind of on that edge of the book already, take offense and just kind of stop. So to large part,
Yeah,
I thought that kind of the book was just kind of talking to the choir, because there's that aspect of really the
yeah,
people that are already kind of in that mindset or kind of know some of the things that he was talking about are the ones that are going to stick through and continue to read. And so it didn't seem like the book was really changing any minds, because the audience, was kind of, self-selecting out of it. He kind of, in being so harsh, was kind of showing some folks the door, or people maybe didn't get through to be able to get to the heart of it and really kind of be able to learn from it. So kind of that
yeah.
you attract more flies with honey kind of thing. And I know there's a time
Hmm.
and a place for everything, of being direct and being very outspoken, but then also too, you want to be sure to craft a message that people actually will listen to and to change. And I can see what you're saying. It could be there are times where it was just off-putting and people closed off and put up their guard, as opposed to
Yeah.
actually, letting things in. I was actually thinking about you at one point too, because I think the line was, empathy is just is just like a cop out for, I forget what the line was. I think I highlighted it. I can go look.
Empathy is a pretty word for exclusion
There you
sometimes.
go. So so it resonated with you. So
Yeah, I wrote that down because
uh-huh.
I have an issue with that too.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. I
I
was
don't know
thinking
what
of
I
you.
don't really know exactly what he means. That's the thing. Like I don't want to assume I know what he means, but
Mhm.
like just that statement alone, with especially without context, really bothered me a lot.
Right. What the way I read it, I think, was that the empathy is not a substitute for getting more people at the table. So not just saying, stopping at, okay, I empathize with you, and still trying to kind of speak for that group or for those people's experiences, but still get those folks at the table, get them designing, get them talking, have them be the ones that are doing it instead of kind of you doing it in their stead. That's kind of how I
Hmm,
read it.
okay. Yeah, that was interesting to me. I didn't. I don't know if it's just because I was. I mean, I listened to the book. I've got it on
Uh-huh.
Audible,
Right.
and I'll be honest with you. For some of the reasons you just cited about how, kind of how polarizing some of it is and off-putting, like just the way he frames stuff, because
Hmm.
he's great with words. I'm going
Oh,
to
it
give
sure
the guy
is.
credit. He's a great writer,
Oh yeah, highlighted all
and
kinds of
as
examples and analogies and all kinds of stuff.
oh, the analogies and some of them
Hmm.
like had me laughing out loud. Like I
Oh yeah.
was like, yeah, you had me in stitches on some of the stuff, you know. And so I enjoyed that. Here's one. His art has as much in common with design as a lobster has with a carrot cake.
Hmm.
It's like, yeah, that's true. I mean, you know, but I just I love that he's a really good writer. And the funny thing is I read one of his blogs, one of his early blogs that I think one of his articles, and a lot of it was about Jack and Twitter and
Hmm.
Donald Trump and how he actually, I think he quit Twitter for a while. I think he
Hmm.
actually just, I don't know if he deleted his account because I just checked, he's got 70,000 followers. So unless he just like restarted an account and he has that much of a following that he got that many followers that quick, I don't know. But
Hmm.
yeah, he quit Twitter and then he came back. But one of the things I noticed was that Twitter, especially before they turned it into 280 characters, it was still 140. That's how it
Hmm.
was for a
Right.
long time. You had to be very selective with your words
Mm.
as a tweeter in the early days,
Hmm.
right? You had to be very selective, and it forced you to become a good writer. It
Mm.
forced you to really choose the right words because um, as we know, Strunk White's rules, they say eliminate useless words, and so
Hmm.
that is actually a principle of good writing.
Yeah.
So I thought it was kind of ironic how in his blog post where he was just totally condemning Twitter and everything, where he's like, "Yeah, but Twitter did teach me how to be a good writer. Thanks, Twitter."
Yeah.
Um, but he's a great writer. I mean,
Hmm.
that's the thing, but he's so passionate that some of the things that, especially again, when it gets into the politics of it, and I understand that as designers, it is a political field. It
Hmm.
can be. So I'm not saying that we need to not talk about politics as designers. I just feel like there was a lot of bias.
Hmm.
I feel like the book could have been a little more. Speaking of inclusiveness, I feel like it could have been a little more inclusive if he was a little less biased with his politics.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, that's something I was noticing too. Is kind of, I think one of the whenever he was talking about kind of like his manifesto of of if we were to be regulated, kind of these different points, and one of them was the ethical point. And I
Yeah.
think that there's definitely a fine line between ethics and politics. And ethics, I think, are black and white, it's wrong or right. But then politics, there's, depending on your viewpoint, there's different gray area in that. And so with one of the foundations being ethics, I think that some of the things that he went to were more politics than ethics. When it comes to different things, it's all depending about, I think, how it is that you define freedom of speech and whether that does flow into the public sector or stay in the private sector, or stay in the, if it's in the private sector, should stay in the public sector, or if it flows over into the private sector too. So I was glad to see that he had that piece on kind of how he was defining freedom of speech, but then also,
Yeah.
it goes with the gun argument and all kinds of different things as far as, I think, ethically, there are things that are right or wrong, but then politics is the flows of, where those are, how those are enacted. And the way
Hmm.
that different things are enacted, I think, is ethical or not. But then maybe your viewpoint behind it might be more political, kind of where you stand and kind of your
Hmm.
philosophy on things. So that's one of the things
Yeah.
where I was getting it at, was that he was, I think, putting his politics sometimes as ethics, where maybe other folks might not have that thought. And so it could be
Mhm.
something that's more for debate as opposed to being black and white, which ethics very much are.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, because early on in the book, I think maybe even in the prologue or chapter 1, like really early in the book, he sort of like gave us a disclaimer about this. And
Yeah.
I quote, I made a note of it. He said, "The more pedantic among you will probably make the case that I conflate ethics and morals, and I probably do, but I don't care."
Right. Exactly.
So he at least gives us a
Yeah.
disclaimer. He gives us a warning in the beginning,
Uh-huh.
that's probably going to happen.
Hmm.
But I will be honest with you, like if this wasn't one of our books to read and discuss at our book club,
Hmm.
I probably would have. I probably would have quit. I probably would have been.
Gotcha.
I'm out after maybe like the chapter 4 or chapter 5. I can't remember, but like I was, I was listening in my car, especially on the way to work, especially, and on
Hmm.
the way home from work, and just there was times where I was like, I, and I'm not saying whether this is right or wrong, but there were times with some of the things that he said just made me angry, not in the way he intended, but in like, and it was like, this is my field. Like, I love the field of design. Like, you're making me not like it that much. I'll be
Oh,
honest with you. So I think that was
gotcha.
a struggle I was having internally. And
Hmm.
again, I'm not saying that that was wrong. Like he probably hit some points, he was hitting on points that I hadn't considered before. And I
Right.
was wrestling internally with this reality that I had not come to grips with as a designer yet
Sure. Yeah, exactly. Well,
until I
so
wrote this.
yeah. So what are the flip side of that? What is the silver lining? What are some of the things that you got out of it? You were talking about, being pulled in different directions. What was the positive direction? Hey, it looks like somebody else
Yeah.
joined us
Hey
too.
Todd, how's it going, man? Your mic's muted. um yeah, so I'll answer that in a sec there. We
Yeah.
greet Todd. Todd, how you doing, buddy? There you go.
I'm fine. How are you?
Hey, Todd.
How are
Hey
you?
Todd, guess what?
What? Oh, beautiful.
Todd made this. Todd
Oh,
made
no
this.
way. Cool.
Yeah, that's a Todd shirt, and the proceeds go to Women Who Code. Is that what it was?
Oh, wonderful.
Girls Who Code and Black Girls Code.
All
Wonderful.
right, man. What a good man. I was blessed to get this shirt in person from the man himself at an event apart Denver. That was just a wonderful, wonderful
Oh, yeah. I
surprise.
need to talk to you all about that. I was out of town,
Yeah.
so wasn't able to go. I was back in Alabama for a Halloween wedding. So it was actually on Halloween, and the reception was a
Oh
costume
yeah.
party. Yeah.
That's awesome. So that's Todd, you were just coming in. We were just talking about just some of the issues, some of the challenges with uh, well, I don't know whether it's a challenge or not. That may be subjective, but how Monteiro in the beginning of the book, he gave us a disclaimer about how he's some of the pedantic among us are going to probably make the case that he conflates ethics and morals, and he says, "I probably do, but I don't care." And so, like, yeah, like again, like I may have quit reading this book if it wasn't part of our assignment, just because there were some areas that were making me angry and not in the way he intended, the author intended. And I think probably because of some of these conflating of ethics and morals, and again, especially for me at least, a lot of his biases coming into his arguments that I feel like maybe excluding some of the folks that he might want to hear this and need to hear. I'm glad I stuck it through because it is it's an important book. I'm going to say it. It's an important book, and it did open my eyes a lot, and it did light a fire under me more than I had before. I'm all about fighting for the users. I
Hmm.
always have been,
Right.
but it lit a fire even more under me after finishing the book in a good way. So maybe that answered your question, Ross, just before Todd came on.
Yeah.
Like that's what, like sticking through it, getting through some of the discomfort that I was experiencing while listening to his words and the way he framed some things. It was worth it because I agree overall with his sentiment. I just disagree
Hmm.
with some of
For
the
sure.
biases and the political aspects that he injected into this rant.
He, yeah, he can be uh, uh, terse. Would that be a good word?
Sure.
And,
Yeah.
and grating. at times.
Sure.
But the way I feel about it is uh, it's a refreshing voice to have, considering what's going on these days, because he may be, very gruff and rough with the tone and language, but it's somebody who wants designers to do better. And I think the design world and the development world, for that matter, can do better and needs to do better, because it's not right now. So I think
I agree.
when I get the book, I immediately get out of my comfort zone, which I think we all need to do at times. And you know, I like you, I stuck it out, and it's a great book. I think it's a great book. So I think it, like you said, Jason, it's a very important book.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel kind of similar to as we read Mismatch. I feel like that was kind of a word that I used as well. That's an important book, and I feel like this is also an important book for other reasons as well. But they're all kind of They're related. That's the thing.
Right.
Kind of
Right.
You could buy those together. Amazon could put those together in the shopping cart, possibly.
And for me, I agree. I feel like this is a really important book and really identified and really agreed with different things that he was saying. I think that it goes back to my qualm of really, I think that the message is in order to help people and to change minds, but people are kind of ushered out because of his directness and terseness. I'm not sure that that's the best approach of really changing minds, and that the folks that do stick it out are the folks that already kind of have that mindset and whatnot. Because like I said, I
Probably already
completely
agree with them.
exactly that about the inclusion aspect and
Yeah.
ethics aspect, and holding ourselves to a higher standard and all that kind of stuff. But folks that might be on the line of that or not have identified it, instead of it holding up a mirror to them, it's kind of jumping out of the bushes at them and might be scaring them off, as opposed to having them kind of sit with that and to be able to look into it. So that was one of the questions I had, though. So we've been talking about kind of the negative aspect, but what maybe were some of those things that really kind of stuck out to you? You were talking earlier about analogies that were really awesome, or just kind of some different points. So Jason, you said you were fired up, but maybe what are some of those things that you might have learned about, or just saying, yeah, I'm glad that this was brought up as a topic in the book?
Yeah, I made copious notes on this. That's when I knew that there's a lot to talk about with this book. And I feel like there were two really big kind of conversation pieces that came out of this for me.
Okay.
And one of them was about the ethics conversation. We have so many design schools and so many options for designers, or even aspiring designers, to learn this trade more along the lines of the hard skills, right? Like how to prototype, how to talk to clients, how to work with stakeholders, how to prototype, right? There's no shortage of schools and places you can go to learn this stuff, whether online or offline. Now, one of the biggest areas of opportunity, one of the biggest things missing, is the required course around ethics in a lot of these schools. And I don't know, I haven't checked lately, but I don't know if there's a lot of curriculum around ethics. When you look at doctors, that's a big part of what they do, and I'm glad, right? Because first, do no harm. Like when I have, if I have a surgeon literally holding my heart in their hands, I want to make sure that they have taken that Hippocratic oath. I want to know for sure that they are licensed.
Yep.
I want to know that. So first of all, the quote that I really loved and I made a note of, speaking about the ethics aspect of education and how important and needed it is, not just one course even, like we're talking like, let's do a semester of this stuff. Let's do at least a semester of just ethics.
Oh yeah.
Around the privacy issues, the accessibility issues, the inclusive issues. Like we need, like, I really believe that. But his quote, I really like this quote. He said, "Teaching a designer to be creative without teaching them ethics is akin to a medical school teaching a surgeon how to open up a torso without teaching them how internal organs work."
Oh yeah.
I love that. That was a great quote, right? Great writing, for
Mhm.
sure. And then so the other real big takeaway for me is about licensing. Like, should we, as designers, particularly when we're working in an area where somebody's life is at stake,
Mhm.
should we be licensed to actually create for these people, to design for these people, and possibly in crises situations? I feel like yes. I think yes, we should, and they
Mhm.
should. And I know that opens up a huge can of worms. I put a tweet out there that I kind of blew up Twitter for the first time ever in like 10 years. I kind of blew up Twitter for a day, and I felt a little special. I felt like a snowflake.
Yeah, you certainly did blow it up.
I think it's a good conversation to have, and
Oh, sure.
obviously it struck a nerve with a lot of designers because there was a lot of
I bet.
engagement around that.
Yeah.
So those were a couple of my big takeaways, and I think he's on to something in bringing those up.
Mhm.
And we're if you look about it, if you look at things and think about it, like, we're pretty late to the party, right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
the reality is, like you said, we're designing the plane while flying it. That's scary.
Oh, yeah.
Scary as hell.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's interesting that you say, you're talking about a surgeon having their heart in your heart in their hand. It just made me think of that. That's literally where we are as well as designers. Our figurative heart is in our hands, in our phone. So, like, my heart is on Facebook, or at least was, when I was in college and using it a lot more. My thoughts, my opinions, my pictures, who I am, a large part of me is on Facebook. That's my, metaphorical heart. And, we're talking so much now about how social media and technologies these days really does affect folks' mental health. So we really do have folks' hearts in our hands when it comes to what it is that we're designing. And so you're talking about building the plane while flying it. Analogy I keep going back to is that one of not doing the research beforehand or really asking the questions why beforehand is like building the time bomb into the foundation. And so that's what I think that we're seeing now, is that this time bomb has gone off and the structure is starting to crumble. And you can't put the liquid back in the tube whenever it's already spilled out on the floor. And so that we're playing this catch up. And it's nice that we're having these conversations, but how much better would it have been if we had these conversations and this adherence to ethics at the beginning? So now because of this book, I hear the phrase "go fast and break things" in a lot different light than I did beforehand. And so now that phrase really kind of makes me sick to my stomach, because this book really kind of illuminated just the damage and destruction that has done. So I really appreciate, it's the go slow and it's fix things, or go slow and do things right the first time kind of piece that he
Yep.
brings into that.
Yep. Absolutely. Well said.
Yeah, my my dad, who builds cars, used to say, "I'm not going to build a car and put the motor in it first. I'm going to put the wheels and the brakes on first."
Mm. Oh, good. Yeah.
Mm.
And I had thought about that after I went through the book a little bit last night, uh, and I thought about that, and we've just taken it to, I feel, a level where, uh, say I get hired at Facebook for a, pretty hefty salary per year and all these perks that go along with it. I'm thinking about the salary and the perks. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to do. Is that going to be, is my work going to affect somebody or something or some process, like, say, for instance, the elections in 2016, for an example. And I listened to Mike's other podcast, Let's Make Mistakes, last night, and they talked about that in great length. And it just, I have to remember, as far as I'm concerned, just to stop, think about what my actions are going to do as far as building. Like, Jason, you and I talked briefly about what I do here at my work, and I got to think about, it's not me working at these different companies that we provide our service for, it's other people, and how is this going to help them do their job better? to uh, give their customers what they need, and that's, you know, making sure they have the right amount of money taken out of their paychecks for insurance every week or every month or whatever. So I mean, the slow down and do things right is very, very important to me, because, you know, that's, you know, go fast and, you know, put the pedal to the metal. And I used to do that all the time myself too. So I can definitely identify with that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like you and Ross both said about the move fast and break things, like that sounded so awesome in like 2007 or 2008. Like that sounded awesome. I was like, yeah, like this is edgy. What I do is edgy, you know, like, yeah. But when you think about it now, like fast forward 10 years and all of the destruction, I don't think we've ruined the world as designers. I don't think we've ruined the world. I think that's a great title that's going to sell some books. However, and it's a great title, but I don't think we've ruined the world, but we've certainly made a mess of things in 10 years.
Yes.
Since we started moving fast and breaking things. But when you think about, when you take a step away from that statement, especially now when it's not so bitchin', you just kind of go like, where else in the world is it okay to move fast and break stuff? Right? Maybe if you're like a demolitionist.
Yeah.
when you're trying to destroy the work that people spent years and years designing and building, like that's a good analogy there too, right? Like that's the only other real world scenario where I could see that statement actually working. But yet we as designers as a whole in 10 years have taken that, have done that. The Silicon, it trickles down from Silicon Valley, let's be honest. Right. And we all kind of we've adopted that in some way or another, or the people we answer to have adopted that, like, wow, that's where the money's at, right? They're moving fast and they're breaking things and they're getting, capital, right? They're getting investments for doing that. So let's do that too. It's like saying, let's put a hamburger menu on our website because Facebook did it. And then like 3 weeks later, they took it off because it wasn't converting. I mean, it may have been a month or two later. They took it out. And then while we're all still trying to figure out how to put one on ours.
Exactly.
That's really crazy. It's crazy talk.
Yeah. That was one of the things that I found interesting, was that part about venture capitalists, and kind of the cycle of that, of how today's venture capitalist was the Mark Zuckerberg of several years ago, and kind of that self-fulfilling prophecy that, I'm going to invest in my previous self. And so in doing that validates who I was and what I've done, kind of aspect. And so kind of, continuing to pull that type of mindset or that kind of person up through the ranks, to being successful. And so I thought that was really interesting. It was talking about just kind of that, that championing that a lot of venture capitalists do of folks that were like them. And so it kind of perpetuates what it is that has been going on. I think it was a little bit later in the book.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I really found interesting was the concept of that veil of ignorance. I thought that was just phenomenal. It was basically the aspect of, if you aren't inserted into the system until after it's been created, so you have just as much chance to be at all different levels, how would that influence your design? So, it's basically just putting yourself in the other person's shoes. The golden rule: do unto others as you want them to do unto you, or whatnot. So I thought that was really powerful, and something that I started really thinking about a lot. That, if you, even though you've built the system, if you have the same chance of being at any different part of the system, how would you then more equitably design the total of the system? Because you would want to ensure that you're going to be just as successful as anyone else in the system as well. So I don't know if you all had a comment on that, or if that had resonated with you in the book, that veil of ignorance analogy.
Yeah, I thought that was really insightful as well, and really the gatekeeper term. As designers, we are gatekeepers. I really like that framing a lot. And then the challenge then to us, as you just touched on, Ross, in that veil of ignorance, the challenge for us is to ask questions, to ask why. Okay, great. Yes, I can. It's kind of like the improv thing. Yes, and
Uh-huh.
yes, I can build this. Yes, I can design this. But why are we doing this?
Mhm.
I'd like to know. What are the implications that said thing being built is going to have on the public, on the people using it, on the human beings on the other side? Why are we collecting data? What are we going to do with this data? Why do we
Mhm.
need it? Can we accomplish X or Y without the data?
Right.
I thought that part was one of the best parts of the book as well. That mindset of, well, if I don't know about it, who am I harming?
Mhm.
Right.
So I'll do my work and then head over to the Mexican restaurant right around the corner from my office on the campus, and have a nice dinner and forget all about it for a while until I go back in the next day. That kind of deal.
Yep.
So
Yep.
now, out of many parts in that book that I found to be, not only mind opening but mind altering, that was one of them for me. That was, no harm, no foul, I guess, in a designer way of thinking.
Yeah.
So,
Don't ask, don't tell kind of thing, right?
yeah.
That's interesting. I mean, it's like, yeah, I'm just processing kind of what you shared there, Todd, because one of his biggest points, I think, in this whole book, which I really also appreciate as a designer, is if you don't want to put your name on it, don't do it.
Mm.
If you don't want your name on that thing, then don't do it.
Mhm.
And that was a big lesson. And quit uh, abdicating your responsibilities by saying, "Oh, if I don't do it, somebody else will do it." Jerry or Sherry or somebody else will do it. Well, that doesn't matter. Like, that's a really horrible excuse for possibly ruining somebody's life.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right?
and he mentioned, you touched upon it right there, Jason. He mentioned Mike got I think he got an email from somebody that said, I can't do this anymore, and they work at Facebook.
Yeah.
And they're ready to leave, but then they're thinking, well, they're just going to replace me with somebody else, and the cycle will keep continuing. And it will. And it will, if that person gets sick of it. There's always this continuous, never-ending circle of however you want to call it, just a merry-go-round of people that are ready to take that job and run with it, and until they get sick of it and somebody else replaces them.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just wonder, like, why are people still applying for jobs at Facebook? Like, I that's just my personal bias. Unless you're planning on going in and like infiltrating and like really making a ruckus, like what Monteiro is getting at in this whole book, like I know part of it is for him. Part of the message is, if you're in an environment like that where you're being asked to do unethical things, like, get the hell out or like take a stand. I think what he really wants people to do is just take a stand first,
Mhm.
Yes.
right? But then I just go, why are people like eager to go and work at a place like Facebook right now, knowing everything that their chief executive officer is doing to people and has done to people, and you can't go anywhere without seeing his face in front of a bunch of Congress people.
Mm-hmm.
Last time I checked, he looked like Lloyd Christmas.
That's great.
WTH.
Well, if you both listen to Let's Make Mistakes, this last episode, Mike's co-host Jessie, she was she worked there for a few months on a contract, and she described some of the perks they get, and it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's like working in the Mall of America practically.
You never have to leave. And that's by design.
What? Yeah, oh yeah. And it's, we're going to give you all of this glorious stuff. You're going to work in an office and you're only going to work, what, 4 hours a day, but you have the other 4 to, go through the whole campus and freely, shop and eat and go to the doctor and go to the dentist if you want to, or, take a ride on the merry-go-round or, the roller coaster or whatever, it's all these distractions after, I just worked on this super duper crafty new Facebook gadget. And now I'm going to go do this, and it's going to take my mind off of that, which is also going to take my mind off of, is this the right thing to do or not?
Mm-hmm. And I think Facebook and social media themselves have just kind of persisted that problem. I think the reason they do it is because it's that aspect of, well, everyone else is doing it. If I can get mine, I might as well get mine while I can. And it's that aspect too of the more even though we think social media has really connected us, it's disconnected us. It's got us separated to where we have fewer in-person conversations anymore. And I'm all about in-person because I think, that's where I'm all about mirror neurons. So when you're talking with someone, you see their face, you see their expression. And so you, in some part, feel that as well. So you have that connection, you have that empathy, you have that sympathy, you have everything that's connected with that. And I think the book talked about that as well, is that with these campuses, at first, they seem awesome because you're really integrated into the company, but then also it does the aspect of really insulating folks from their real communities, from the places that they go and they live. And so if you're spending 80 hours a week at Facebook and all you're doing is sleeping in your apartment, that's not your community. You're not attached to that at all. And so it's separating you from that, and the only people that you engage with are the folks that are like you. And if you don't want to engage with someone on Facebook or on media, you just turn it off or don't look at that post. And so I think that's where it comes from, is that aspect of, might as well get mine while I can, but then also this aspect of relationships are hard, and they should be hard and difficult. And I think we've made them too easy to a lot of regards. I remember reading a Hemingway book a while back. I think it was The Sun Also Rises, but I thought it was really interesting because there was a part where they were making fun of a character, and then he didn't take too much offense to it, and they went back and then had a good relationship. And I was just thinking, you won't see that these days, where if somebody makes fun of someone or if they give them a hard time, that relationship is shot. And so people just, I don't feel, are as resilient as they used to be when it comes to interpersonal interaction sometimes, partly because it's so easy to go home, to disengage, to have all the entertainment and everything you need right there. So that's something I would like to see, is more folks kind of putting themselves out there, really getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, because I fully believe that that's really how it is that you grow, is being with other people, seeing other people, and seeing those facial interactions, those mirror neurons. I think that that's just something that's hugely important, and that we miss that when it comes to just specifically technological interactions. Because even now we're on Zoom, but it's still no replacement for us being in the same room together. Right now I'm having to look at the camera so that you can see my eyes, but I'm not able to see your facial expression, and vice versa. So I'm having to switch back and forth. So any system that I think that we have right now is still imperfect for that human, replacing that human connection. That's so important.
Yeah, I agree. If it wasn't for in person, I wouldn't have gotten 16 hugs from Todd last week.
Yeah, there wasn't a bunch of that.
Yep.
2 weeks, 2 weeks ago. It was
about.
So,
well, and
so
you and I wouldn't be having this conversation. That's what I came out to Colorado and we met together, and so got to know each other better than we would have just, I think, sitting in on these things. So so it goes, I think, full circle.
Yeah, I agree with you. And we were talking about the way that these tech environments are laid out. They're masterminded. It's masterminded for keeping people there as long as possible. Why? For work, for labor. Now it's masked. It's masked in a paradise, right? Like if you need a massage, go down to level 1. There's your masseuse right there, ready to just kind of, help you relax a little bit, and get the stress out. And then, you need a triple latte, whatever, there it is, like, next door, or, anything that you need is there. Chef meals. Like, it's like, that's by design.
Mhm.
And it's, you have to kind of like, although it's masked as a perk, and I think in many ways, sure, yes, it is a perk. That's
Oh yeah.
cool to say you work at a place that has all of that. But then you got to question kind of the ethical aspect beyond that. When you look beyond the surface, why do you have this here? It's for labor. It's to keep people there as long as possible. And something totally like triggered in me whenever we were when we were talking about this initially, and all of the amenities and everything. I just couldn't help but think of Pinocchio. Do you remember? You remember when they went to Pleasure Island?
Mhm.
It's like that. It's everything that a kid could ever want: candy, rides, fun, right? No parents. And but what happens to all these kids? They turn into donkeys, and they
Oh,
become the labor.
sure. Oh yeah.
Crazy.
I'm not going to be able to watch Pinocchio the same way again.
You will not.
I just got Disney Plus. I saw Pinocchio's on there, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to watch it.
You're never going to be the same.
Yeah.
I had a friend of mine say it's like an upscale sweatshop.
Oh man,
These
wow.
companies,
Wow.
you know, you like you said, Jason, you get the masseuse over here. You have, you know, your triple latte. You know, they can entice me with a lobster roll store, but we'll save that for another day. I think, you know, a upscale sweatshop is really what they are. Could be Facebook, could be Apple, could be Google, could be Amazon, you know, any of these
Yeah.
companies.
I think it goes back too to really what he was saying throughout the book as well, is that a lot of these things were made with the best of intentions to connect people to whatever, and then it's just over time that's become overshadowed and changed. And so I think that's what it brings to the important of just to, it's up to us to continue to ask these questions, to continue to say, is this still right? What are these things behind it? And yeah, for just people to think more deeply into what are the ramifications. I think that's what we've been getting at this whole time, is just thinking deeper and to really think outside ourselves. So with empathy and experience and all kinds of things like that, to really be be true and honest with the impact that what we do has. And I think that you know that goes out of design as well. We were talking, Todd, before you got on, was that aspect of, he was saying that, you know, the first job of a designer is to be human. And so I think that that's it, that if we're not thinking outside of ourselves and being honest with who it is that what we are, who it is that we are and what it is that we're doing, and that understanding that our actions have ramifications, if we're not doing that, we're feeling as designers because we're first feeling as humans. And I so think that that's really what it comes down to, is you know, what is it, the best laid plans, something like that, or I don't know, devil's in the details, something like that. Of, you know,
Yeah.
these things started off good, especially the campuses too, but have kind of morphed into something else because I think other folks let other things get in the way, and maybe not continually asking the questions of, you know, just because we can do this, is it something we should do?
Right. Yeah, I agree with that totally. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Same here.
One of the last things I'll bring up, I've really started thinking a lot differently about like user reported comments and things like that. That's one of the things I really got out of the book, was this aspect of how some of the companies are kind of passing the buck on on reporting to the users. So instead of having leadership saying, no, we're going to nip this in the bud, we're not going to have it, put that on the user to report, and then say, okay, is it against our guidelines or not? Really kind of taking that cop out. I forget what the exact line is, but it was something is no replacement for leadership. And I think that was something like user reporting is no replacement for leadership. So I wanted to hear what y'all had to think about that. That was just something that really kind of came out. And I was thinking, oh, you know, that's important. I don't think I'm going to look at, you know, the way things are policed the same way again.
I think we're seeing a more of a trend of reporting that is falling on deaf ears, as far as what I've seen with Twitter, what I've seen with Facebook, and what I've seen with the upheaval over GitHub and the ICE contract, and people, you know, forming a you know, I guess, you know, becoming allies with the people that work at GitHub that want the contract to be terminated. And I think that we have CEOs and boards that are just tone deaf to this. And as much as I think the user, I would like to think the user still matters, I don't think the user really matters as much anymore as they should. I mean, we have, I saw an instance where two women were putting time out on Twitter for 24 hours because of a tweet each of them wrote, trying to get a fake account to be, you know, blocked or terminated or whatever, and their accounts ended up being the ones that were you know, putting time out. And that's the kind of thing we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of people that shouldn't probably, and we could, I mean, there's a whole First Amendment thing, but people that really shouldn't be on these platforms preaching what they believe, yet they still are. But we're seeing, you know, average people getting, you know, their accounts shut down for a while just because they have a disagreement with these people or these groups. So I don't think the user really matters much to these CEOs and boards in these companies anymore.
Yeah. It's all about the almighty dollar, really. When it comes down to it, it's all about money at the expense of humanity. And that's the problem.
Yep.
That needs to be solved.
Well, what we're seeing too, especially with Twitter, is, you know, the bottom line is the stock prices or the margin or the, the, you know, Jack wants to roll out this new crafty little design feature or implement some sort of weak response to what people are asking for, and yet the problem still remains, but he's still making his money.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope, man. It's a slippery slope. That's probably why there really hasn't been a lot of action on that, because I can see both sides of the coin. I mean, I totally get Monteiro's point about racist being on like outright racists who are espousing this crap on Twitter. Like, I totally agree with him that these people should not be given a platform on Twitter.
Yeah.
And then you have like our president, and then Obama was on Twitter as well. And there's a lot of people who didn't agree with stuff he was tweeting out either. But you know, you didn't have the same kind of outrage. I'm not going to get political here, but you have Trump now, who is obviously, he's very outspoken, just like Monteiro. They're both very outspoken individuals. And then he's like, he wants to shut him down just because he doesn't like some of the things he's saying. You know, like, I know people say Trump is a racist, but I don't know that to be true. Like, is he really a racist? Like, do we know that to be certain? I don't think that's true. I think that's an assumption. But the reality is that we do have the freedom of speech, which means we do have to listen to what other people say in this country, whether or not we agree or believe it. And that also is where empathy comes in too. And that's the slippery slope, because empathy doesn't mean agreeing with somebody, but it means trying to understand where they're coming from. And I think, ironically, as designers, we can be some of the least empathic people in the world when it comes to somebody saying something we don't agree with. I think there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, I would have to say, from what I have seen from our leader, it's very subtle. It's very uh, subtle, I guess would be the good word for it. And there's a whole history with his family, which, if you know, I don't want to. I won't go into that.
We don't have time for that.
Yeah, but yeah, I can see where there is a conundrum with, how do we approach this and still, have that First Amendment right. And that's why I'm not a CEO of a corporation.
Amen, brother.
I don't want that's way too, way too much responsibility. And granted, I mean, I've had my fair share of, going after Jack because of some of the things that he's tweeted that were not, empathetic, like his meditation retreat in a country where there's genocide going on. But it only serves as a reminder for me that I need to do better than that.
I think that you have a great point, Todd, and I think that kind of encapsulates it all, is the fact of really what I get out of this book. And I think the main theme is just how much responsibility designers have. And so, not going into it, not knowing that or being ignorant of that, but fully understanding that and leaning into that. Stepping up to the fact that there's a lot of responsibility, but there's a lot of power in that too. And so that, with me as somebody that's very new to design and still wanting to get into it, that's really what I was able to get out of this book, is to realize I appreciated that perspective, because it was really kind of one of those things that made me step back and say, is this really something I want to do? Is this a path that I want to keep going down? Because it's not just ping pong tables and salmon lunches. It's also a big responsibility too, and times that you have to step up. So yeah, I think that really encapsulates it of what you were saying about, there's a whole lot of responsibility that goes with that. And the higher you get up in those companies, and the more authority that you have, the more responsibility that you have as well, to the people that work for you, but also mainly the customers as well, and the users, because that's what I really got out of this, is that designers, we work for the customers, the users. The company might write the checks, but ultimately it's the user that we report to, and who in the long run is going to be either screwed over or really empowered by what it is that we do.
Yeah, well said. There's a quote that I guess my final words would be really just repeating Monteiro's words and what he said. I think this sort of encapsulates a lot of this too. He said, we need to make sure the tools we build are not having adverse effects on the community we build it for.
Mm-hmm.
Will that slow us down? You bet. That's a feature, not a bug. We've seen where moving fast and breaking things gets us. The only way out of this mess is together. Amen.
Amen.
Yeah, those definitely words that couldn't be more true. Definitely. So I'm intrigued to know, Jason, when you're going to have him on User Defenders.
Yeah.
I'm asking tough questions now.
You know what? I'd have a conversation with him on User Defenders. I'll be honest, I've never sought it out, just because, like I said, he's very polarizing, and you either love him or hate him. I've always kind of been of the camp that sort of hates him. If I'm being honest. And but I think it'd be an interesting conversation. I admire, like, you missed this part, Todd. You came in a little late, but I admire the guy. I admire his passion. I admire his ability to put words together. He's incredible auteur, writer, if that's the right word, auteur. He's really, 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 really good at communicating. And so I think it'd be an interesting conversation. I'd love to have him on the show. Mike, if you're listening, get a hold of me. If you
Thumbs up
haven't
that
tuned
too.
out
I'd
yet,
love to hear that too.
I would love
Awesome.
to hear the conversation, to be honest with you, because I think
Yep.
that when you have, and I just heard this recently, and I really had to think about it. It was, why keep talking? What, and I'm paraphrasing here. Why keep talking with people that you're always agreeing with when you're not talking to anybody you disagree with?
yes, absolutely. That's where we've gone wrong. Not to kind of open up another can of worms here. I know we're wrapping up here, but I think if we can all have more empathy for one another, then I think that we are going to go a lot farther together. I really do believe that. And as designers, we have a great responsibility before us, greater than we've ever had in the history of mankind before us. What we do from here on out is really what's going to impact
Yeah.
what our kids, what their kids, and what their kids, should the world last that long, inherit.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, because if the fringe case is now 20 million people, yeah, if 1% of the fringe is 20 million, that's still a lot of
There it
people.
is.
Yep.
There it is.
Yeah. Well, I think we're at time, folks. I want to thank you all so much for being here, for Todd and Jason, of course, for giving the platform to have these discussions and the conversations. So thank you all for being here. I know I need to be stepping off in just a second, so I want to respect y'all's time. But yeah, thank you so much for being here. I love these talks and love these conversations, especially too knowing that we're going to have the conversations. I read the book a lot more critically and a lot differently. So I know it helps me out. I hope it helps y'all out too.
Definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
Thank you both.
big time. Thank you both too. Ross, great job moderating again. And thanks for stepping up and doing
Oh,
this,
sure.
and taking the
Anytime.
reins.
Yeah, all right. Well, we'll get that next book out there and we'll keep it going.
Sounds good.
All right. Sounds good. Well, y'all have a good day. I'll talk to y'all
You
later.
too.
Take care, guys.